Today marks 500 days of war, 500 days since our world was turned upside down. Let's not forget how this war began. It began on October 7th when Hamas broke the existing ceasefire, committing the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. 1,200 people, Israelis and nationals from countries around the world, were raped, tortured, and murdered, and hundreds were taken hostage into Gaza. 500 days later, and 73 hostages remain in captivity, held in the darkest dungeons of Gaza without food, without sunlight, tortured, injured, and their time is running out. Hamas orchestrated and perpetrated these acts, but it was not alone. Thousands of Palestinian civilians from Gaza also took part. And one day after October 7th, Israel was attacked again, this time from the north, from Hezbollah in Lebanon. And let's not forget the Houthis, Islamic jihadists in Iraq and Syria, and of course the head of the octopus, the Islamic Republic of Iran, who attacked Israel in the largest ballistic missile strike in history. And throughout this seven-front war, throughout Israel's existential war, the world was silent. Silence from the United Nations, silence from many Western leaders, silence from human rights groups, silence from women's rights groups, just silence. And worse than silence were condemnations from the UN, kangaroo courts, hundreds of thousands taking to the streets not to call for the release of the hostages, not to demand for Hamas and Hezbollah to surrender, no, but to accuse Israel of genocide, to call on Israel to stop defending itself, to lose the war. And with these calls and the weak leadership displayed by world leaders came the rise of antisemitism, the age-old phenomenon in a new form. And Jews are once again being targeted around the world simply for being Jews. But despite all of this, despite everything, in these 500 days of war, the IDF and Israel's security forces were able to launch incredible operations. Who can forget the beeper attack? But these came at a heavy price. Over 800 soldiers, brothers, sons, husbands, fathers, killed in combat. We don't forget their heroic sacrifices. And Israel, for the most part, has stood alone. It's had some help from allies, but not enough. And today, 500 days later, we continue to see the strength of the people of Israel. We see their resilience. Israel is beginning to rebuild, to rehabilitate. A change in leadership that has finally brought the moral clarity that was so sorely lacking since October 7th. Our allies, especially the United States, led by President Trump, is standing alongside Israel unequivocally and is demanding change, not from Israel, but from Hamas and its allies, demanding an end to the status quo that brought us to this day. 500 days in, we are in the midst of a ceasefire. The axis of resistance is severely weakened, but the war is far from over. It will not end. We will not be able to move on until Israel sees the return of all the hostages and Hamas is eliminated once and for all. But today there is finally optimism, and there is hope.